see the slides, really? Some people like to read them. They like to see the words in front of them. It says,
They're filming it.
that's true. Yes, look at you. You guys are on top of it. I love it. You've been here all day. Who's exhausted? Whose brain is filled to the back?
It's nap time.
I'm very sorry. I will forgive you if you nap over there, okay?
Good thing.
Yeah, if you nap.
They were giving you.
For interrupting your nap. But you chose to be here, right? I have once had someone nap in my class, very early in my teaching, looked like Santa Claus, which was kind of heartbreaking because he sat right in front of me. And there were only like 12 people in the room. And he didn't snore. That was good. Oh, I kind of wish I had a little swoop in the wake him up. I don't know. What do you want me to do? Something, right? Yeah, something I could just. But everybody would have seen me and I would have been horribly embarrassed because I wasn't very confident about standing in front of people and speaking. I was all nervous and sweaty and. So I am Lisa Wasson. I'm a community nurse educator for Hope Health. Any of you familiar with Hope Health? Okay, quite a few people, that's great. Hope Health is based in Providence. We are a home care, palliative care, and hospice care agency. My role, although I am a nurse and I do have done patient care, certified in hospice and palliative care. But I do have a specialty in dementia. It's sort of a focus. I sort of fell down a rabbit hole and then got these certifications and started going out and teaching folks about new things we've learned in Alzheimer's, dementia in general, dementia research, different ways to interact with the people. And when I was younger, which you might laugh at me, that's okay. When I was younger, I was an occupational therapy assistant. And I graduated from school for occupational therapy in 1999. And we were taught very differently how to interact with someone with dementia than we're taught now. I have folks, clinicians, right, providers, nurses, CNAs, social workers come to my classes, even in our new hire orientation, and they say, I don't know why I have to be here. I've been doing this dementia thing for 30 years. And I'm like, okay. Well, I say to them, well, first of all, there it is. Thank you. Don't be sorry. Technology's the best. Don't be sorry. So I say to them usually, you get 2 CEs for this, so just hang out, and if you don't learn anything from me today, tell me at the end. And at the end, they go, oh my God, I never heard that, I never heard that. I'm like, oh, now you know why you were here after 30 years in dementia care, right? And they're like, oh, that would work so much better with Mary or Susie or John. I do tend to refer to my patients in the female. I don't know why. It's a habit. I tease my mom that I refer to her all the time as my person living with dementia, not wishing it on her. It's kind of something I'm expecting down the road, family history and all. But dementia became a focus that I really enjoy. I enjoy helping other people who care for someone living with dementia understand more of what's going on in their mind. What is actually happening inside their brain that is making them react and behave differently and talk to us differently and look at us differently and stare at us when we give them, cues or ask them a question and they don't have an answer. So the more that I can help folks that live with or care for someone with dementia, the better that is, right? Because your day is better and their day is better. That's why I do this. So I was asked to come in here today and speak to you about recognizing the signs when it comes to someone living with dementia. When is it time to reach out for support services? When is it time to consider adult day health or adult day care, however it is titled, or home care, long-term care, assisted living, and of course palliative and hospice in the end of life. So I pulled together some of the information that I have to try and do that for you today. I am going to skip over a couple of slides in the middle. I'll be honest, I was at lunch today reviewing my program and said, this shouldn't be here. I should have moved it. So I'm going to skip them. Because I don't want us to start right off with, my plan was to discuss identifying late stage dementia, but not everybody's in late stage, and that's not what we're considering. Home care, adult day is not appropriate for someone in late stage dementia who's dependent for bathing and dressing and unable to feed themselves. That's not the right time for adult daycare or adult day help. So I'm going to skip over those, so bear with me. There we go. See, there it goes. Ta-da, disappeared. What I'm going to do is start with some tips that I have for you, even though this is not about recognizing the signs, but tips that will help you with communication and connection with the person you care for that will. Okay? These are some of the newest that I find to be super helpful, and I will make sure I cover those other things. I'm not going to miss those, when is the right time for these different services. I'd like to start with communication. Communication is incredibly challenging as dementia progresses because the brain loses the ability to understand the words we say and then to express what they want to say. And when they have the challenge with being able to tell us what they want or need, they become frustrated, agitated. Why? I even get the look from people like, why don't you get it? I'm telling you, but I don't get it because the words are not words that make sense to me. So, some tips for you, even if it's early on, they'll be helpful going down the line, and you will remember and you'll say, oh, that girl at the conference said this, let's try it. So the first tip that I have is to greet them by name and not by title. First name. Our culture and society tells you that to be appropriate and sometimes I choose the wrong words, but politically correct, or however it is, that you should address everyone as Mr. Smith, Mrs. Jones, right? To those of you ladies who are married, do you still have your last name from birth?
Yes.
Yeah, you do, from birth, not your married name.
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay. Then we can call you Mrs. whatever your last name is. For myself, I didn't become Lisa Watson until I was 35 years old. Now, if you're caring for someone with dementia, if you ever have, you know that time traveling happens, where today they might remember it's April 2024, but tomorrow they might not. And if tomorrow I think that I'm 30 or 25, I have no idea who Watson is, so I am not going to answer you, because I don't know that person. I had never even met anyone with that last name. The only ones I know right now are the ones that I'm actually related to. It's not a familiar name. So for me, if you were to call me Mrs. Watson and I don't think I'm that, I've been married yet, then I'm not going to answer. But how long have I had Lisa as a name? Right? So there's nothing wrong with using someone's first name. It's not rude, it's their name. So I tell everyone, and this means also children, grandchildren. It's a little weird as a grandchild to call your grandparent by their first name, right? You never talked to my grandma and called her Simone. She would have thought I was causing trouble, right? But if she was living with dementia, she is going to answer to Simone, because that's been her name her whole life, since before she could talk. I watched this wonderful video from one of the dementia programs that I took, where there was a young woman during COVID who was FaceTiming with her grandfather who lived in a memory care and assisted living facility. And while she was talking to him 10 minutes of FaceTime, she got his attention in the beginning and they started talking. And he didn't know who she was, and then he knew who she was, and then he didn't know who she was as his granddaughter. But she called him David every time he got distracted from the call, because how do you keep someone's attention on a screen, right? Every time he got distracted, she would say David, and he would look right back at her. It was very touching because he told her this whole story about his beautiful, wonderful granddaughter, Rachel, which was her. It was such a wonderful thing that she got, that wonderful gift from him. But he didn't, through the 10 minutes, didn't know who she was the whole time. So using his first name made it easy. I used the example of a patient I cared for years ago who was a doctor. And we called him Doc most of the time. He liked that, but he didn't always answer to Doc. But Bill was his name. So Bill worked. In any situation, he would answer to that. So that is super helpful. So grandma, professor, doctor, Mr., Mrs., we're trying to think of other titles we call people by. Babe.
I've been doing it for 50 years and she's not answering.
That's okay. It is a term of endearment, and coming from you, it's appropriate, right? But is it appropriate for me as her nurse to call her babe? Honey, sweetheart?
Good luck.
Well, sure. That's fair. Absolutely. I'm not your sweetheart. I tell people that, right? So you're right. That's not, they're not your sweetheart. They're the person you're caring for. That's different. For you, she's your babe. I love that she's still answering to that. If she stops, call her by her first name, right? And it might be just for a day or part of a day that happens, okay? The next tip that I have for you is to position yourself in their visual field. What does that mean? I know, complicated, but the reason I say that is that you and I have a visual field like this. If I do this with my jazz fingers, I can see all the way out here. By age 75, for all of us, our visual field gets smaller. But by moderate stage dementia, which happens to be when we usually get a diagnosis and the doctor says, you're right, it's not just normal aging, there's more than that, the visual field is this big. About a dinner plate. A big American dinner plates, right? But it's the same as if you were to take your hands and put scuba goggles on. Yeah, don't be afraid to try it. The teacher's silly, you can do it with her, right? Now, where did all your neighbors go? All those people you were sitting with in the room. You don't see anybody else but me. So if you guys make no noise, she might think she was alone. If she was someone living with dementia, I was only talking to her. Then when we put food down in front of them and they look at their plate, where'd everybody go? There's no more socialization because they don't see you anymore. They're looking at the food. Okay? That means a lot of things. That means if you approach someone from over here, keep looking ahead. If I come up and I approach her over here, she's gonna jump because I snuck up. Because you could see me today, but if you were living with dementia, you wouldn't have known that I was there. That's why the startup happens so much. Because they don't know you're there. It's like you snuck up on them. Okay? And it's a safety issue if the person is likely to have falls. So that's why I say put yourself in their visual field. The other thing about this is, for you, sir, if you did this, don't look up at my face, look straight ahead for me. What part of me are you looking at? That's not helpful, is it? Right? So we need to be down here. Because up here is my belly, it might be your tag, it might be your name tag. Well, that can be really interesting, but if I want them looking at my face, it's not helping that they're looking in my midsection. So we want to be in front of their eyes, wherever their eyes are, wherever they're looking. Then I say stay still. When we're caring for someone, we're doing a lot of things all at the same time. We're doing a lot of talking, and I can fix your sweater, and I can adjust this, and we can get that shoe on. Oh. If you want me to pay attention to you, be still. Say what you need to, then do the thing. If you're moving all around, they're not going to follow you all around. That becomes more difficult as time goes on. Making contact outside the intimate zone. Intimate doesn't just mean these parts, okay? Your intimate zone is anywhere your hands will reach. Within my arm's reach. That means this is intimate space, and this is all intimate space. So, one of the examples I use a lot with healthcare workers, especially our CNAs that help with feeding, is that we just want to get that soup that dripped. We reach right in there and get it. and they react and pull away. You gonna let me walk up and touch your face? Can I just do that? Right? It's okay. How about I get those things off of you, right? You don't want me to do it. Well, if it's not appropriate for me to do it right now, why is it appropriate for me to do when you don't understand why I'm doing it? Okay? Outside the intimate zone is to start typically at the knee if they're sitting. If you are sitting and you put your hands like this, they come down before your knees. The knees aren't considered intimate, which if you had someone and you didn't want to touch your knee, maybe. But it's far enough away to not be really scary. Okay? And starting there is the way to start. Get their attention here. Hi, Joanne, how are you today? Right? Where up here is much too close to start. Okay? Thank you, Joanne. Using visual cues. Dementia, the way that it affects the language center of the brain is that it makes nouns hard. Naming person, place, and thing. So remembering your name, really hard. Saying, I saw a squirrel outside might be hard, but you can say, I saw the fluffy tail and it runs up the tree. Then you know I meant squirrel. But finding the name of that thing is something that's challenging with dementia, where they can describe it, but they can't necessarily say the thing. So if you use a visual, it's more helpful. I'm hiding my McDonald's soda, I'll be honest with you. But you might say, do you want a drink? Right? Do you want the coffee and show a cup, even just the mug, right? Coffee? A bottle of water? Those kinds of things help. Are you hungry? It helps. Are you cold? Because they don't have to comprehend or understand the word you say, they can understand the visions. Okay, see, I can't hide anything because I tell everybody. And the last thing is just rush. So, we live in a society that everything's in a hurry, you better be productive, don't ever stop, never take a nap. I'm proud of you for napping. Everyone should. And as we care for people, we rush them the same way. It takes someone with dementia longer periods of time to process what you asked for. You told me to put my jacket on. If they're capable of doing that, it takes a while to get there. What did you tell me to do? How do I do it? Where is the jacket? And all of those steps have to be processed for them to do it. Which is why if you have an appointment at 11, you better be getting up early so they have plenty of time to be ready to get in the car when it's time for the appointment. Okay.
Question.
Yes.
Now, when you're talking about all that timing and stuff, are you talking reverse, dementia, stage?
I'm talking, it depends on her. It depends on her. If you are having no problem getting ready and out the door, great.
Yeah, I mean, there are little things out there that you are relating to, as far as taking visuals, I don't really have at this moment.
Just keep it in here,
Yeah,
because you will eventually.
eventually.
Eventually you will. Making a connection, meaning actually making a connection with a person with dementia. As dementia progresses, it's harder and harder. They seem a lot different than they were. They're not the same as they had been in the past. And connecting about memories can be difficult. Long-time memories are easier to grab onto than more recent memories. But it can be really brief connections over a memory. Maybe you're talking about your wedding, a trip, a family gathering, a holiday, something like that. But sometimes they're small and fleeting. So we want to do what we can to have them when we can. If you're slowing down, you won't miss them. And something that can be really helpful when making a connection is difficult is using music. Music, poetry, and prayer. For whatever reason, the way dementia affects the brain, the area of the brain that holds onto music remains strong all through this disease. So if you are trying to bring up a memory, put on the Christmas Carol song, whatever, Jingle Bells or whatever, maybe their favorite if you're talking about Christmas. Put on the wedding song, put on their favorite lullaby that they sang, or sing it to them, that they sang to children. These kinds of ideas, because music sticks. Yes.
I don't know if you've seen it, the great documentary Alive Inside.
Yes.
About people who have memory impairment. And some people are almost nonverbal, and then you put the headset on and they like light up. So
They light
it's
up.
very moving and well worth watching.
Yes.
Alive
Yes,
Inside.
it's called Alive Inside. There's also a video on YouTube of a woman with advanced dementia who was a prima ballerina in Swan Lake. And although she's wheelchair bound and nonverbal, they put the music on from the song. I don't know which song it is, but the big finale for the Swan. And she sits up, pulls her shoulders back, and starts to do the arm and head movements to the song. Blew me away. Gives me goosebumps every time I think about it. So it's on YouTube. Check that one out. It's great. The rule of thumb that we teach folks for the best music to reach for is music that was popular for them between age 10 and age 30. Which might seem like a long time ago, but we have the most significant life events then. Right? We have sports and clubs and high school and prom and graduation, maybe scouts, all sorts of things. Maybe marriage, maybe kids, maybe college. And in that time period, there's a lot of that music is connected to. So bringing out that music will help to have that connection over the memory. Prayer is very similar, just like poetry. You know, the lyrics, there's some sort of rhyme or reason to the lyrics with poems. Prayers are very much lyrically, I don't know, the way they're written, I don't know the right words when it comes to that, but if prayer is something that they have done throughout their life, it's a way to connect. It's also a great way to calm them down when you upset them by accident. Because I don't think we ever do those things intentionally, they just happen. But someone living with dementia, their fight, fright, flight response, the one that keeps us safe from tigers, is really heightened because they don't know what you might want from them that they don't know if they can do. So they're anxious and triggered right away, just when you approach with whatever the next task is. So music can help to soothe them, prayer can help to soothe them. They're really useful in that way. We're putting on the TV, not useful. Someone with dementia, as it advances, has trouble determining whether that's the news and happening somewhere else in the world or right outside their house. They actually study memory care units and long-term care folks with dementia after the attack on the White House, the January 6th thing, because they had the news on, the staff was watching. Well, the patients thought it was happening outside the building they were in because they couldn't tell the difference. Let's see, I have music and prayer in there. I want to make sure I didn't forget things. Doing things one-on-one is best as the dementia progresses. Earlier on, group activities, being social, wonderful to continue as long as they're comfortable. But as this disease gets worse, doing things one-on-one and spending time with them, reading their favorite book to them, reading the newspaper, well, maybe not the newspaper, but think about news. You don't want to upset anybody. If the news was nice and happy, that would be different. And just holding hands, let them know you're there. Our nice, warm hands. Pressure in the palm is comforting for us, so all throughout our life, we hold hands. It helps us be more comfortable, so keep that in mind. Let's see. Interpreting behaviors. Now, not everyone with dementia has behaviors that are, I don't want to say negative. We call them negative because they make us uncomfortable. That's the fact of it. We call them negative because they bother us. But they're behaviors that are out of their norm because they need something we don't get. We're not getting. We're not understanding it. We need to figure it out. So these 5 are the things that I like to suggest you look at if there's some sort of unusual behavior happening from your person. Try them first, you hungry or thirsty, those are easy to eliminate, right? Offer them a snack, offer them a drink. If that settles it down, you're all set. It could be energy level, how much time have they been up and active and around, or on the other end, are they bored because they've been sitting in their recliner all day watching, I was gonna say Golden Girls. But yes, well, however, right, same thing. So maybe they need to get up and move around, maybe that's what they need, is they're squirming in the chair because they've been sitting around too long. Doesn't mean they have to take a nap, but maybe they need a rest.
You just try to get her to take naps.
Well, because that would be easier for you if you would, right? Absolutely. But sometimes rest is just no demands on my brain to produce anything, to follow your directions, to answer your questions. Give me 20 minutes with no demands. How many of you guys would like that? Now, right? This is the time of day, between 2:30 and 3 o'clock, we're all like strolling and going to get another cup of coffee, hitting the snack machine. I know, I do it too. Hence the McDonald's soda, right? Sometimes the rest is just a rest for their brain. Then, restroom needs. Those are usually really high priority there, and likely. The reason I put discomfort separate from pain is because pain isn't the only kind of discomfort we can have. Anxiety, constipation. I did say elimination, so let's move away from that. How about difficulty breathing, nausea? I'm too hot, I'm too cold, that's discomfort. There's this stupid tag, I had one yesterday in my shirt, driving me crazy right here. What if I can't tell you there's a tag? Right? You need to figure out why I can't stand this item of clothing, and it's, so discomfort, there's lots of things it could be, and the reason I put pain, even though it's at the top, it's the last thing I want you to consider because we don't always want to medicate and think that's going to help. And not a medication for a pusher. Pain, lastly, if they have pain, we should be keeping track and keeping it under control, but leave that to last, try all the other options first. Okay? Sensory stimulation, this goes along with too hot, too cold. Is it too noisy in here? Is it too crowded in here? Right? Maybe it's the holiday and everybody's hanging in the living room and the grandchildren are running all around and your spouse is looking like, oh my God, I wish I could just hang from the ceiling. Maybe you have a room separate that you can go chill out in that's quiet for a little while to get away from all that stimulation. Those behavior things start to occur because I don't know how to fix what's bothering me. Tips for mealtime. Mealtime can become difficult. Feeding themselves, then getting them to eat when you're feeding them becomes more difficult as time goes on. It also is difficult if this is my field of vision and you put an entire tray full of food in front of me. And I say tray because in long-term care, lunch is the biggest meal in a nursing home. Because dinner is smaller, so they have more digestion time and they're not going to bed with a big heavy belly. So they have this huge meal. If you just take it aside and put one dish at a time, they will eat better. Because I can eat this bowl of fruit, but the bowl of fruit and the sandwich and the soup and the coffee is way more than I can wrap my head around. And that's what happens. So offering one thing at a time, moving the rest out of the way, will help them. It actually encourages them to eat more, because I can handle this, but I can't handle this. Right? Like when you go and look at a buffet, you're like, oh my God, I have no idea which thing I want to eat. I'll have a little of every single thing. So if we can spread it out, that is very helpful. One item at a time, decreasing distraction. So music, okay, turn off the TV, stop the excess conversation that's going on. In less crowded spaces is helpful. Restaurants can become really hard because it's a completely new place or location, new people all around, lots of conversations, and a whole menu? Limit to 2 options, 2 things you know they like, and you're gonna have a better situation there because lots of options become too many. keeping their visual attention on the food, as I was saying, if I put food and I'm looking at the food, that's great. Now you say, babe, and I look up, babe looks up at you, now there's no more food. So if you really want me to eat more, you gotta say, oh, that looks so good. And stop talking to her. Because if you talk again, she's gonna look at you and then the food's going in. Right? Those are my tips. Okay. 6 types of support services. These are the ones I mentioned already. When do we know? I'm gonna start with adult day health because this is usually one of the first external support services that we might look out for someone living with dementia. Bless you, bless you. It's springtime, everything's blooming and everybody's decent. Adult day health or adult daycare, memory care centers that are just for the day and they come home and stay with you in the evening and maybe it's only 1 day a week or maybe it's 2 or 3 days a week. Those facilities, those programs are a safe place for them to socialize and for you as the caregiver to get a break. And there's nothing wrong with saying you need a break. No one can physically care for another adult for 24 hours a day, every day, for how long? On average, they're saying 4 to 8 years right now. I thought it was more than that. People live with dementia for a long time. Not everyone, but in general, a long time. That is a lot of demand on one person, especially if you are the same age generation they are. You have your own medical issues, your own physical issues, and then someone else is dependent on you for everything. So, the right time, starting with their diagnosis, so we've got that, or you wouldn't be here. They're needing more help with their self-care, bathing, dressing, toileting type things, feeding, needing help staying active because we don't want them to be sedentary and sitting in their recliner all day if they're still able to move around, going out for, it's spring, so thankfully every other day it seems, you can go outside for a walk because on the other day it rains, right? You won't melt. I always say to my kids, you're not made of sugar. They don't think I'm funny. My daughter told me, you're really funny, Mom, but your jokes aren't funny. It's like, how does that work? I don't know. But we want to keep them active. The more they're using their muscles, the longer it will take for them to lose the ability to use those muscles because they're still using them and exercising them. If you need a safe environment for them and you don't have someone to come and stay at the house while you go to your own appointment, or you go to coffee with a friend, or you go to the salon and get your hair done, because guess what? You deserve it. That stuff shouldn't have to stop. Adult day health can help with that. They can go, they can be here all day, you know they're getting fed, they're getting cared for, they're getting socialization and exercise. Sounds good to me. Sounds good to me. And you get a little break from all of that caregiving. Whether it's half a day and it's a few hours, or it's a whole day and it's like 6 or 8, depending on the situation. Notice I'm looking at someone for cues that knows that better than I do. I did. Thank you very much. It's still that time off for you to take care of your own needs. Because if you have your own medical conditions and your own physical issues, maybe you have to go to therapy, but she might want her out the door. Right? Okay. So it says here, the caregiver, that's you, needs time off from attending to them for every second of the day. But they can't be left alone. If you could go to the market and come back and you don't have to worry, great. But if there's a safety concern and you won't leave them alone, you either get someone else to stay with them, who may or may not know what they're doing, right? Or adult day health where there are trained professionals who know how to work with and communicate with and care for someone with dementia. Questions on adult day health? That's okay. Next one. Assisted living. And I don't know if I'm putting in the right order, so just go with me, okay? We're gonna get them all. Diagnosis of dementia, check. Unsafe to live alone? Their care needs become more burdensome than you as a caregiver can handle on your own. they're physically too heavy to move around on your own, you've got bad knees, you can't transfer them from bed to chair, because even if they're mobile now, they will eventually need help with those things. Getting out of bed and getting to the chair, going from the bed to the kitchen, to the bathroom, getting off the toilet. All of those needs become more difficult. So when it becomes too much to do on your own, or you and your helpers, you know, your other family members that are helping, not everyone's doing it alone, solo, right? But when it becomes too much to do at home, and it is not safe for them, or it is not safe for you, then assisted living, where they will, you actually have your own, or they would have their own, it's like a tiny apartment, little kitchenette. We're not burning the place down with a stove, because there's a dining room that has a menu, and you get to like go out to eat every day. I'm sorry, I would love that, I don't know. I want someone to just put out a white linen and be like, Lisa, what would you like to have for lunch today? That sounds fantastic. Then if there's other needs that they have, say, your washing machine breaks and you can't keep up with their laundry, you can actually have the facility do that. Yes, the extra services cost a little extra, but is it easier to have them wash their laundry or for you to haul it to the laundromat because your washing machine is broken, right? We have to weigh those benefits and burdens when it comes to those kinds of things. Again, I have here when for you as the caregiver, the physical limitations of movement are more than are capable of keeping the person safe in their mobility, right? Because if I've got a bad hip and then I can pull this person up and out of bed, and it is, it'd be amazing how heavy another person is if they're not helping with their muscles, right? So if it's not safe for you and not safe for them, assisted living can be a good option. If you cannot provide all of their needs and you don't have help, it's definitely a better idea, because there's not someone else you can tag in, right? Tag, you're it. Time for you to do the shower today, because I did last time. It was too much for me, right? But I'm grateful. No. Okay. So now I'm going to talk about long-term care. Always would be after assisted living, or maybe just skip the assisted living, maybe long-term care. Long-term care, skilled nursing facility, they're the same facilities that, yes?
I feel like you missed a step in, before daycare. There's also the possibility of hiring for live like for a couple of hours a week.
Private care and home care,
Yeah,
I'm getting there.
you are, okay.
Like I said, I don't know if I put them in the right order, so hang with me, we'll be there in a minute. Long-term care, when we call a nursing home or a nursing facility, a skilled nursing facility, it's because the person is going there for a short-term stay to heal from an illness or an injury, surgery, broken hip, bad knee. They're going for therapy, PT, OT, speech, maybe wound care from the nurses, but it's temporary, and that's when we call it skilled nursing. It's called long-term care when they're not getting the therapy and all of that in the facility, and they're gonna live there and stay, okay? There's no harm in that. Lots of folks go in for the skilled therapy to get them as strong as possible and then stay because they didn't get back to where they could be living at home again. And that happens often. So in order to go to be the right time for long-term care, diagnosis of dementia, they need, and I put full assistance here, but it's not always full assistance, but what we call extensive assistance. So it takes you a lot of work and you're sweating by the time they're dressed. That's what I mean. You have had to fully dress this person. Help them get their pants on, get their socks on, get their underwear on, or brief, or whatever it is. You help them in the bathroom, you help them eat their meals, you help them change into their pajamas, you help them in and out of the shower if they shower. When you are doing all of that helping, that might be the time for long-term care. People get really resistant. People make a lot of promises about, I promised her I'd never put her in a nursing home. Don't make those promises, folks. The reason I say don't is because you never know where you're gonna end up. You don't know what might happen to you, you don't know what might happen to them. That makes it too hard to keep that promise. And you don't wanna feel guilty because you made that promise and then you didn't keep it. But your safety is just as important as theirs. Okay, you don't wanna make yourself worse off because you promised and you're continuing the care that's too much for you. So, helping with what we call ADLs, activities of daily living, bathing, dressing, toileting, feeding. Maybe they need help with managing their meds. Maybe you're having trouble keeping track of their meds. Did they get them today, didn't they? Now there are, as the next lady here in the middle said, there are agencies that will come and help you with those things, and we're gonna talk about that in a moment. But if that is becoming too difficult for you to manage for them with all their medications or even getting them to take them, then there are nurses and CNAs and med techs that know and are trained in how to do that in the long-term care. If they need assistance feeding, like you have to feed them because they're not able to feed themselves, or maybe their diet needs to be modified, like maybe they ended up with a pneumonia because they aspirated, and that's when the food or their liquid or even their saliva ends up in their lungs, in their windpipe instead of into their stomach, and they develop pneumonia. Then they're in the hospital, they get their antibiotics, and the speech pathologist is going to visit them, and then they're going to say, you really should do mechanical soft. Anybody know what that means? I know some of you do. Mechanical soft, can you imagine doing that at home? What that means is that everything should really be ground up food. Not puree in a blender, but kind of like tuna fish or chicken salad, like that consistency, nothing solid. Okay? That's not easy to handle at home with all of the foods that you're trying to offer. Neither is puree. That might happen too. When swallowing becomes more dangerous, we want to puree diet that prevents them from choking and aspirating. That means you have to blend every single thing you feed them. Again, more trouble maybe, more of a burden for you than a benefit in that situation. If they really need your physical assistance to get up and transfer and move around, that might be a good time, especially if you have any kind of back injury, hip injury, knee injury, shoulder, frozen shoulder, all of those sorts of things make it really hard to move another person. I mean, you go into a pain clinic or a, I'm trying to think, chiropractor and ask them how many nurses and CNAs they take care of that have back and hip and knee and shoulder injuries from doing this all the time. Okay, and they're trained in the right way to do it to be safe, and it still happens. Then lastly here I have when it comes to long-term care, because in long-term care, the building is secure. The doors are locked and there are safety devices that will keep your loved one from leaving the building. So if wandering or leaving and then not remembering where home is a concern. If safety concerns, they might take the car for a drive, they drive off, they get lost, they go home to the old house, we haven't lived there in 20 years. They're bumping into things with the car, they're leaving the stove on, they're dangerous with cutlery. Now, I do encourage folks, don't think that just because there's a diagnosis of dementia, they can't cook, they can't peel the potatoes anymore, because they've been peeling potatoes forever, and it doesn't mean they can't still do that. But once they become unsafe with those tools, then we stop. We don't stop right away all the things, because that makes them feel useless, right? They want to still be a helpful, purposeful part of their family, society, community, as long as possible. We want to keep that for them. It keeps their brain working, okay? Now, home care, we're at home care, this is for you, all right? Yeah. I put serious illness here, we're talking about dementia today, but home care, it's about serious illnesses where folks can live in their own home, but it's difficult for them to get out to doctor's appointments, to a therapy place for physical therapy, or trying to think of other, mostly appointments that they would need to go to heal, to improve from an illness, from an injury, from a fall, and those sorts of things. So if they're homebound, that's what we consider homebound. It's great difficulty to leave their house and go to appointments. Then they can have home care, which is helpful for you as a caregiver because a nurse can come to the house and check their vital signs and go over their meds and make sure that's all in order the way it should be. Making sure they don't have a fever and their weight is where it should be. They're not, getting fluid on or whatever it is, because we know dementia is not the only thing going on, right? So they're receiving treatment for something because home care is typically a nursing service with physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, whichever they need. There are home care agencies that you can hire privately to provide assistance with things like bathing and dressing and showering or making meals or even like housekeeping. And sometimes they can come for a couple hours a day. Some places you can hire someone to come in the morning and get them up and out of bed and dressed and then come back and put them in bed at night. But it's out of pocket. You have to be able to afford it, and it is not inexpensive. Every agency is different, but on average, they're all around the same. Some have requirements for, you can have someone come, but it's a minimum of 3 hours, and if you send them home after an hour because you don't feed them anymore, you're still paying for 3. Or 4, or 2, I mean, it depends on the agency.
Daycares are out of pocket,
Adult day, yes,
so
yes.
sometimes having someone come for a shorter time, is gonna be cheaper for you than sending them home to.
That's true. Sometimes it is. Sometimes that cost of a person coming to the house is less expensive than the adult day. If your need is only for a short time, and an adult day, they be there more of the day, it's a matter of choice. I'm not saying any one is better than the other. Everybody's situation is different. Medical folks will say when you meet one person with dementia, you have one person with dementia because every single one is a little bit different. I can give you lots of general information and ideas. Not everyone is having the same difficulty, right? And today you might be in this part of your journey, but the person right next to you might be here and the other one's way over there. Okay. Repeated complications here means because of their dementia or one of their other medical conditions. If your person with dementia has congestive heart failure and their fluid is going up and down, so they gain weight, they can't breathe, they end up in the hospital. They give them the water pills, then they feel better, they come home. Then they gain a few pounds, they can't breathe again, they're back in the hospital. Back and forth. That's an easy example. There's lots of reasons. Someone with respiratory like COPD, lots of trips back and forth to the hospital. If they've gotten to the point where their balance and mobility is poor and they're having falls, how do you know if there's an injury inside there, right? I actually had someone say to me recently, my daughter had gotten injured and she said, the school nurse said, well, I know you're a nurse, Mrs. Bussin, but I don't have x-ray vision. I don't either. It's just a sprained wrist for crying out loud. She wanted x-rays anyway. But we don't know, right? And if your loved one falls, can they tell you if they bumped their head or not? They can't always tell you. They don't always remember. The instant you walk in the room, they're on the floor. You're like, oh my God, are you okay? Is it hurt anywhere? Did you hit your head? They may not know. I had a patient I cared for in the nursing home. She was my golden girls lady, that's why I said that. She worked 24 hours a day. And she used to fall all the time. She was this high. I was so glad she didn't get hurt a lot. I always said it was because she was closer to the ground, so she didn't fall quite as hard as I would. But it was always unwitnessed. Nobody was there to see her fall, and she was on the floor and couldn't tell us if she hit her head. So, into the ER, back home, into the ER, back home. It was constant. Having home care, this lady, Rita, was in a nursing home. But in home care, if they're living in your own home care can help to prevent those things. Keep an eye on the fluid, make sure we adjust the water pills so that they're not going to get into the crisis where they can't breathe. Work with you on ways to keep them safe with the bathroom or whatever the transfers are that are becoming more dangerous as far as falls go. Help you eliminate things in the house that are fall hazards and those kinds of things. So this is why I say repeated complications and frequent trips to the hospital. The complications could be frequent infections. Gosh, she's got another UTI, right? Again, she's got that nasty cough again. Oh, we're back to the doctor again, back to the doctor. Having a nurse from home care visit regularly will keep an eye on her, will help to prevent that, or at least catch it sooner so they don't need the second and third antibiotics sometimes to get rid of it. They don't get as sick because we catch it sooner. Okay. Palliative care, that is palliative care is a type of service that a lot of people don't understand. And absolutely rightfully so. For a lot of reasons. One being that doctors use palliative care as a nice way to introduce hospice care. But they're not the same. They're not. You can't even have them. If you can have palliative care right now, you're not eligible for hospice and vice versa. So I do a lot of teaching with medical professionals to not do that. Don't call it palliative care because you're afraid to say hospice to someone. Palliative care, first of all, diagnosis of a life-limiting illness, which dementia is. People don't typically die from dementia, they die from a complication of dementia. Something that happened because of the way the dementia has affected their body. Okay? So we start with that diagnosis. When it's the right time for palliative care, they're still getting their medications, they may be getting PT, OT, nursing, they might have home care, or they might be in a nursing home for skilled nursing, they can have palliative care. Because palliative care's focus is managing symptoms that make them uncomfortable. Any pain, anxiety, depression, nausea, vomiting, constipation, urinary issues, whether incontinence, retention, those kinds of things, what things are making them uncomfortable. That's what palliative care focuses on. Lessening their discomfort as much as we can so their days are better, so they feel better. The other thing that palliative care really focuses on is, we call it goals of care. That means advanced directives, like do you have a living will for your loved one? Do they have a power of attorney, a medical decision maker? That kind of stuff is important, and if you don't have it, they should. You all should. You're all over 18, get one. That's a soapbox of mine, I can't help it. Then they can help you to understand what you're answering, what those questions mean, what you're really choosing. A lot of people don't know what CPR really does to the human body. It is nothing like it looks like on TV. Not at all. CPR is actually only effective 4% of the time that it's performed. Does that blow your mind? I couldn't believe it. 4% of the people who receive CPR actually have their heart start again. And if that happens with your loved one, they still have dementia. That's not unusual. They still have their other medical issues. So it's important to really get down to the nitty-gritty, right? Down to what does it really mean? What does this decision mean for my loved one? If it comes into play, because it doesn't always. Okay? Another reason you might have palliative care is if your loved one is having difficulty swallowing, and the doctor said, oh, we'll put in a feeding tube. That is not a dismissed thing. That is such a big deal. And they make it sound easy because for the surgeon it probably is. It's probably a simple surgery for the surgeon, but it's not for your loved one. Anesthesia, surgical wound, post-op care, wound recovery. It's a lot of information. Palliative care can go over all of that with you and your family as you make those decisions. If your person has had a significant weight loss, they're not eating anymore, I don't know, I can't get them to eat. They're losing weight. Or they used to be able to get up with me and I could get them up and we would walk to the kitchen and it was fine, and now I can barely get them out of bed. That's a change, a severe change in mobility. That's a good time to consult palliative care. palliative care people, professionals, be nice if I had words for what I do, right? Are in the hospitals, the nursing homes, the cancer clinics. They're there. You don't always need them, but if you know about it, then you can say, hey, do you have palliative care? Can I talk to that person? Because that could be really helpful. And the healthcare workers, the clinicians aren't always on top of, oh, right, now's the time I should make that referral. So if you know, then you can advocate for your loved one. If they're having a lot of mental or social or spiritual distress is how we talk about it. So they used to be really social, loved going to the senior center, went to church every Sunday or Sunday, Wednesday, however. I know people have lots of routines when it comes to that. And now they don't want to go. And they're not sick. And they physically could, but they don't want to go and want to stay home. That's distress because they are being distressed over someone might catch me, might figure it out. Someone might notice I'm going to be embarrassed. That's a time to consult palliative care. How can we help through that? And again, frequent trips to the hospital. The reason I keep putting that in is because maybe we can manage and keep them home, which is really best for them. Being in their familiar surroundings with their familiar people is what's best for their mental health, their cognitive ability. It gets worse if they're constantly moved to new places, new people, new locations, and all of that. It was really difficult during COVID because everybody was like all gowned up and all masked and huddled. Like, you gonna trust this person to be undressed you? Right? You can see maybe their eyeballs and you're gonna let them do what? Put it in the catheter? No. Right? So that was really hard. Last but not least, because hospice is super important if it's needed. Everyone deserves extra special care when they reach the end of their life. With dementia, it's hard to know when that is. Because if this is a 10-year journey, one of the rules, one of the guidelines as far as hospice care is that they must have a prognosis of 6 months or less. Well, how can you tell me we're at 6 months? We've been doing this for 12 years. What do you mean? Now it's 6 months. Well, hospice professionals know how to look for that. They know what to look for to determine. But it's not even me, if I was the nurse who came to your house, it's not me who decides it, it's actually the doctor. A hospice trained doctor and your loved one's doctor. They say, I know this person, all their medical history, and yes, I believe now is the time because they will likely pass within the next 6 months. And that's what hospice means. Now, a lot of doctors say palliative instead of hospice because the hospice word is scary because all of our older generations remember when it started in the 70s and it meant you were dying this week. That's what it used to mean. And that's what they know. So they hear hospice and like, what do you mean I'm gonna die? I'm not ready. Well, no, right. Right, you're not. That's not the thing. What happened is the medical community figured out how much hospice helps keep people in their own home, keep them comfortable, and actually improve the quality of their life in those last 6 months, 3 months, 2 weeks, whatever it is. So they let us get in there and help sooner. If you reach the point in the dementia where they are, they cannot help you with bathing. They cannot help you with dressing. They are not continent. They're incontinent of urine and bowel. Then you're probably close to that point. Yes? Oh, gotcha. Thank you. I forgot who you were. I did for a moment there. That's right. So when they become completely dependent in all of those things, that's when we're likely looking at hospice care. So they have the dementia diagnosis. They're not getting, so here's the thing. The rules about hospice are no treatment to cure or prolong life. Dementia medications don't do either. They help with symptoms, but they don't actually extend the person's life, and we haven't found a cure yet. So that part of it isn't really necessary when it comes comes to hospice, discussion, but it's one of the three main things when it comes to hospice care, the three main rules to go by. If we have all three of these, then a hospice referral is helpful. Hospice folks bring in a nurse every week, a social worker, a chaplain. You can have a CNA. It all depends. CNAs vary how often they visit, depending on how much help you need or your loved one needs with bathing, dressing, feeding, and those sorts of things. There's also grief support or bereavement support for you as the loved one, the caregiver, and your family that's involved in this person's life, and they stay and support you even a year after the person passes away, because grief comes and goes and comes and goes. And if you're living with someone or caring for someone with dementia, you're already grieving them. Because every time something changes, you grieve that loss, that change. Oh, we're never gonna do that. And it changes, and you're grieving it along the way. So these services can support you while you're dealing with that, with those changes. They can even help with making the decision to move to long-term care if that's what's really best for everybody. So, I say all of this because hospice, I want you to not be afraid of the word anymore. It doesn't mean anyone's dying this week. If your loved one is in the ICU and on a vent, and that's what's keeping them alive, then maybe. But not typically when it comes to dementia. We can have months and months and months. You're with them, we're caring for them, and they do really well and have great quality because they're getting that extra care at home. And all those comments about hospitalization, if we can keep your loved one home, it's better for them. And it leaves those beds for all the other people in the waiting room, right? That is all I have for you. If you have questions, I will stay and answer them all.